GEAR Up Southern West Virginia is an amazing federal grant program that brings a lot of funds here to Southern West Virginia for us to work with our young people to prepare them for and get them into post-secondary education. We want all of our communities and our families to feel and know that their children can go on and achieve great things in life. We're barrier breakers, right? We say, you think this is a barrier with financial aid? We'll knock that down. You think your child going on to higher education instead of going right out into the workforce is a barrier? We'll talk to you about it. We'll figure it out and we'll knock that down. I've had a chance to meet your kids, the students, and they're phenomenal. It makes me so excited about the future of Southern West Virginia. It makes me excited for our country. It makes me excited just to be alive at this time. And I just want to say thank you for letting me be a part of this.
GEAR UP stands for Gaining Early Awareness and Readiness for Undergraduate Programs, which is a mouthful. But basically, the federal government has recognized that education is super important for our communities and for our society. So they have given us a lot of money to be able to help students who are under-resourced and in rural areas to achieve that and get access to it. We have some big overarching goals, helping the students to improve their academic performance, helping to make sure that they're graduating high school, helping to make sure that they're attending school, and increasing college-bound culture. So a lot of it is getting the students into colleges for tours and to get that experience of what it's going to feel like maybe if they go to a 2 or 4 year institution. Taking them on job site visits is going to very soon be a big thing that we do, so that if they think they want to go into whatever field, nursing, let's get them to shadow a nurse so that they can see what the day in the life looks like, to see if that is really what they want to do. Exposure, I think, is the big thing. Making sure the students have opportunities to know what is out there for them and that it is possible, and educating their families on how to get financial aid and how to pay for it. All of those things are possible through GEAR Up. We try and make it as easy as possible, honestly. We try and do all of the legwork so we can just be like, here you go. And this is for you, and make it so that it's accessible for everyone.
Anxiety, in my experience, is like you're constantly being chased by something. My body is constantly going through fight or flight. One of my clearest memories is sitting through math class, and I remember I did not listen to a single word the teacher said that whole class because I was trying to subdue a panic attack the entire time. If you're a teacher and you find that one of your students deals with anxiety, let them know that you're there for them. Like what my teacher did was, I could always go to her classroom at lunch. That teacher let me just come one-on-one, be with them alone in those instances, and it helped build a relationship. It helped lessen the anxiety I feel, at the very least the anxiety I felt when I was in their class and in their presence. Find ways to let that student or students know that they are there to support them in any way they can and the student wants them to.
I'm a native Southern West Virginian, and I'm a social worker by trade. Been a social worker for over 35 years now. And I've always spent my career working with adolescents and families on helping them to reach their dreams and reach their potential. Sometimes people have been torn down so much by life, or have historically seen that people only go so far, and so they just don't believe. They don't know there's something else to believe in. So you got to help them be able to develop those visions. What is it? If you could have anything, okay, what's getting in the way of you getting that? Let's figure this out together. And it's just that truly having that belief that these folks are full of all kinds of amazing potential. And I see it over and over again.
I am a first-generation student. I think the greatest challenge is understanding the value of a higher education, because when I was 18, I did not think I wanted to go to college because I was 18 and I thought I knew everything, unfortunately. Luckily, I had a little mom back there going, oh no, you're going to go to school, there's more to learn. So that's a challenge. I think for kids today, the resources are a big problem because college is more expensive. And I think that's why people like me, like our foundation, I think we're the ones that work really hard to make sure there's money to cover the cost of education. I think the government is working harder on that than they had for a number of years. And those things make it possible for students to come and not leave with mountains of debt. We don't want students to leave not being able to cover the cost of their education. So I tell students, if you're given an opportunity, say yes. Always say yes. Because I think a lot of people say, I don't think I can do that. And they step back. Try it. You know, if you try things, you're going to find out for sure whether you can or not. And then you can take a different avenue if that one didn't work. But say yes, because you don't know what you can do until you try.
Embarrassingly so, I'm terrible at math. So I was recommended to get a tutor. I got a tutor, and it was the most horrifying experience. He would sit there and tell me he didn't understand why I couldn't do this. And he would sigh and, I've showed you already. I don't understand why you can't. This is so easy. What is wrong with you that you can't get this? And he was a tutor. And I used to tell my students, like, I will never tell you that this is easy, because it's not easy. What is easy to you is very difficult for somebody else. I did not know how to ask for help. I didn't know how to advocate for myself and stand up for myself. So I suffered through it for that semester. I asked friends that I trusted, and then they helped me through. You can't be afraid to ask for help. The first time you do it, it's going to feel terrible. But then maybe the second time, or the third time, or the fourth time, you're going to find somebody that's going to help you.
I'm an only child, so it was just me and my mom and my dad. My dad's parents lived across the road from us. We lived way out in the country. My dad was, like I said, was a coal miner. His dad had been a coal miner. My mother did not work at the time, and he was a type 1 diabetic, which is the kind that you have from childhood. So he had been a diabetic since he was 12, had the insulin shots 3 times a day, ended up going into kidney failure and had to be on dialysis. And this was in the 80s. So we actually had to drive to Beckley 3 days a week for him to be on dialysis, which was about an hour from our house, until they finally put a dialysis machine in our house, until he was able to get on the transplant list and get a kidney transplant in Cleveland Clinic in the 80s. So it was a big, big deal back then. Like now, I think most surgeries are a few days. I mean, he was up there for a few months. I was in first grade at the time, and I got moved around from neighbor to neighbor, and my grandparents took care of me. And once he came home, he wasn't able to work anymore. My mom ended up having to get a job. And like I said, she just always really pushed education. You're smart. Let's, see what we can do with that. But you got to work at it because we can't pay for it. I've always said I'm not smart. I was just a good student. Like I was good at school, the process, the papers, the all of that. The most stressful part for me was probably, you're trying to keep everything together at home and be a good kid, and then go to school and still make friends and be a good kid. And I mean, we were poor at that point. We made just enough that we didn't get any assistance except for the free lunch program. I was a free lunch kid. So we worked on scholarships. We applied for every scholarship that was out there. I did the ACT prep classes so I could take the ACT. I was lucky enough to score high enough on the ACT that I got free tuition. I went to Fairmont State, which is in the northern part of the state. I won a family scholarship that was based in Summersville called the CAM Family Scholarship. And since I had free tuition already, they agreed to pay my room and board so I could go. And then once I got there, I worked for a professor, and I got like $200 a month maybe, and they waived my books. So I was able to actually graduate from college with no loans to pay back.
I think that we learn the most when we fail. And I use myself as an example because I was one of those students that things were fairly easy for me, right? I didn't really struggle in classes, but I think that was a little bit to my detriment, because whenever I got into the Academic Success Center, I didn't always understand my students and where they were. And I didn't know how to always help. I've learned, but I didn't always know how to help them work through it because I'd never experienced it. And I've come to the conclusion that you just learn so much more when you struggle through something, because then you learn the process. You learn what you need to do to get where you need to go. Failing something twice is not a big deal. It just means that the third time you have a leg up because you've been through it twice. And if that's something that you want, then do it the third time, the fourth time, the fifth time, because you're going to learn something new every time. And it's not so much the success in it that matters. It's the effort that you put in and the process, and you're learning so much through it. So, I mean, if that's your goal, don't give up on it. I don't care how many times you fail. It's totally worthwhile.
I was involved mostly in like the music aspect of high school. I was a band geek in high school, marching band, big old thick uniform. That was me out on the field at halftime. It's always intimidating to go from middle school to high school. That's like a very big transition for every student who grows up in our education system. At least with marching band, you have the summer band camps. It helped me because I got to kind of know people across all grades who were from different parts of the high school for a few weeks before school actually started. So about when school started, I already had friends, kind of a community I can always fall back on for support. And it made the transition into high school a lot easier. But I mean, that followed all the way through senior year graduation of just having that big group of people who are always going to be there for you.
Going to school full time and taking care of a child and also working is not impossible. It's hard, but it's not impossible. Scott Finn told me that one time. He was the executive director of West Virginia Public Broadcasting at the time. He was a journalist. He's probably had one of the biggest impacts in my life, honestly, my professional career at least. And he told me one time, I was just talking about how hard it was to launch the radio station and this, that, and the other. And he was like, just because it's hard doesn't mean it's impossible. And that has really stuck with me. It's so true. Just because it's hard doesn't mean it's impossible. It can be done, and it's okay that it's hard. And it will be hard, but it can still be done.
I think when I first came here to teach at Concord University, I was teaching one class, and it wasn't pretty. It was pretty scary. And I remember looking around, and I didn't have all my degrees in place, and everyone here had PhDs. And I'm like, they're so smart. And I'm not, I mean, I knew I was smart enough for some things, but I didn't think. So I had the person that hired me explain to me this thing called imposter syndrome. And I was like, I think I have that, and you just work with it over years and you realize I have to meet the standards. So I went back to school and I got my degrees, my master's and my doctoral degree. And it took me about 10 years. When I finished my doctorate, I was 47 years old. I had been here about 15 years working. And it was just a great feeling to know I had finally met the mark. But there was a lot more to learn. That's one of the great things about working in higher ed. There is so much to learn, and no 2 days are alike. I don't think anybody isn't enough. You're enough. You're enough, and you're beautiful, and you're strong. You have to find those things in yourself, and a lot of us, it takes time. So I read too much on Facebook and all those other things, and I listen to people who say that, and I think, you're 24, or you're 22. You're not going to get that till you're 30. So keep trying. Don't give up. Don't give up on yourself.
I always say the only limit to your potential is the limit of your courage. Sometimes we think we have to do big, huge things in order to have courage. And I found, when I was decided I'm going to do this, I'm going to go William and Mary, I'm going to go to, Harvard, all these different places. It's small steps. It's small baby steps. It's just getting out of bed, writing that first paragraph of your application, things like that. You look at Indiana Jones, movies that kind of romanticize academia, so to speak. And I was just always enamored with that. I loved learning, being able to kind of be the master of your own adventure, so to speak, through learning. I kind of honed in on that, and I tried to find ways that I could keep doing that and trying to do that in the best way possible and learn as much from the coolest, most awesome people that I could. It was terrifying. I always say, don't let fear result in failure. Just use the fear as motivation to, keep you going.
We know that the one thing that is indicative of students to climb out of poverty is a 4-year college education. So we also know the challenges that come with poverty, and it's often considered just everyday life for people in Southern West Virginia. A lot of times, no, we're not all shoeless and toothless, and we definitely know that. But we do know that we are a gritty community, and we know how to survive and things like that. But with GEAR Up, we are here to help families and the communities and students to find those tools to graduate from high school and succeed in a 2 or 4 year college education. And I know the impact that can have in these communities because I grew up in these communities and know the realities that they face and continue to face today. And when you live in a community where you're constantly looking at ways to survive, and it's one thing after the other, you can't just go and write a check to get all new tires whenever you need them. You can't go and go to the grocery store and stock up on things. You really have to think very critically about what you can buy this month and what medications you need next month and things like that. And when you're thinking about and you're in that kind of survival mode, it's not something that we have the luxury of thinking, where am I going to apply to the next college and what kind of summer camp do I get to go to help really enrich my life? No, it's, even as kids, how many lawns can I mow so that I can help with, the new pair of cleats that I'd like to have as a child so that I can go play softball or baseball or things like that. And I think that with a program like GEAR Up Southern West Virginia in these communities, it's helping to bridge that gap with the very limited resources and time that the students and families, parents, teachers in these communities have in helping to reach that. And hopefully we can make it a little easier to just put these resources, the applications, the opportunities right in front of the students, families, communities, and break down those barriers that might have existed before so that they can have those kind of opportunities. And this can be truly life-changing and a change for the entire community.